All right, welcome back. Powers on Sports podcast. You just heard from TJ Reeves, gave you a little potpourri of the sports world. Now we are dialing in to the game of the probably the year. Forget about the SEC nationally. This is the game of the year, probably the biggest game in Tennessee football in almost 25 years, back to the 98 national title team. And no better person to talk to this talk matchup in Athens Saturday afternoon, 3:30 CBS, than Vince Ferrara, our buddy down at 99.1 The Sports Animal, Tampa guy. He'll be, he's right there in Knoxville, Tennessee, right in the heart of it all. Welcome back, Vince.
Tampa, brother. Good to be on with you. Appreciate you having me.
Never thought we'd have you on 3 times in about 6 weeks, but man, these Tennessee Volunteers keep shocking. Now, I'll say shocking the world, but keep doing what they got to do, taking care of business. I know a lot of people thought last week that Kentucky game could be a kind of a trap game, and they came out and destroyed Kentucky 44-6. Georgia does what they got to do at the cocktail party. You know, gets a little dicey there in the third quarter against Florida, but they put them away early in the fourth quarter. But just give us the atmosphere in Knoxville. We're recording this midweek here. Give us the atmosphere in Knoxville as we head to the show down in Athens.
Yeah, first, I didn't buy into the trap game stuff. Not with this team. Yes, it had the ingredients, and you can point to things. Kentucky had the open week, and Georgia looming, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the ingredients were there, but I knew better with this Tennessee football team. Been there, done that. Learned your lessons and doubting them earlier in the year. And you mentioned shock, and then you corrected yourself. That's what a lot of people have to do. They have to flush what your preconceived notions of this team were, and this is an incredible team. The reaction is Tennessee in the college football rankings is ranked number 1.
and we're recording this about an hour after the rankings come out. Yeah. Tennessee 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Clemson 4.
Yeah. So just the fact that Tennessee is 1 is so joyous to Tennessee fans. They know what's ahead of them on Saturday, but I try to preach it. I think other people in the media are too. Enjoy it. Enjoy the ride. It's been so long. Or you get nervous about where you're going to show up in the rankings, or, wondering if your team is going to get it done this week, but you're in position to be discussed at the end of the college football playoff selection show. The first selection show of the year, and Tennessee has its head coach interviewed after them being announced number 1. You kidding me? So I think Tennessee fans, for the most part, are enjoying this. It's crazy. It's wild. We were taking on our afternoon show today when we were recording it. We were taking a whole bunch of college football playoff scenario type of calls.
Oh, yeah.
But hey, go for it, because when else have you been able to do this? You haven't. And so that's the overriding thing, is just so impressed, and fans are pumping their chest out too. And I don't blame them for that either, because they're outperforming anyone's expectations, and they got a lot to be excited about with this football team.
A lot of people don't even realize this is only year 2 of Heupel. 2 years ago, it was a dumpster fire with Jeremy Pruitt. People were leaving left and right. I remember you and I talked last year how many guys had transferred out, and they had a good, even Hendon Hooker. And Hooker wasn't even the starter until midway through last year. I mean, until the second or third game of last year. I mean, nobody even knew who Hendon Hooker was a year ago. And for Heupel to be on head and shoulders top of the mountain in his first playoff release, from a recruiting perspective, this has got to be huge for this Tennessee program.
Oh, Jason, everything in this ride has been gold. The scene for Alabama with the fans and the goalpost, when you just beat Alabama and snap the streak, the cigars, all of that kind of stuff, the national attention that they've gotten, all that is gold in recruiting. Because don't think they didn't have 100 or so recruits there on hand to witness it all. This class is pretty much full, so it's more a benefit for down the road for them, and being able to put those on one sheets and different kind of things to send the recruits. So it has been gold from that standpoint. But Tennessee is legit, and I think you have to kind of pinch yourself to wait, Tennessee is in this position, but then you have to adjust.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have adjusted and wondering, all right, this is the week for the letdown and all that. Bad opponent, good opponent, great opponent. It doesn't matter. They're week to week with this football team, and there isn't any of that kind of stuff with them. So just been wild with everything they've done, and I expect them to be ready to go on Saturday too.
Got to be pretty easy on the network 99.1 just to turn on the volume and let the calls come. You ain't got to do much work if you're a host this week.
Yeah, and in reaction to all these games too, it's so much more enjoyable. You're right, it is easier. You don't have to theme out shows or kind of distract them from into something else. You can deliver the goods and talk about what everybody cares about, and that's Tennessee football the most. Crazy thing is, there's a lot of other great things going on in Tennessee athletics as well. Basketball team is going to be really good. Baseball spent a bunch of time at number one.
Yeah.
A lot of other Olympic sports are having the best run they've had in a long time. Danny White's got this thing rolling. I can't remember a time where the athletic department as a whole was performing better than right now. And certainly it's uncharted territory for a long time for Tennessee football.
All right, let's get into the matchup a little bit. Let's start with the Tennessee offense versus the Georgia defense. No Nolan Smith for Georgia. Big loss there. One of their key older guys, veteran guy that's been around. How do you see? I mean, obviously, one of the big advantages you'll hear all the analysts talk about Tennessee is their wide formations, how they open up gaps in the field, how they provide opportunities for the running game. You can't really stack the box because you got the wide formations. Just talk a little bit about the Tennessee offense versus that Georgia defense.
Yeah, and you mentioned an important part of this game, and that's Nolan Smith being out. Talked to Chip Towers from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that covers Georgia. And he said the biggest thing is his leadership. I mean, he is always motivating, getting guys in the right place. And unfortunate because he's a guy that came back to school and passed on the draft, or else he would have been a pretty high draft pick last year as well. So you hate it for him as a senior. But look, that's a position that they have recruited big time. So they've got other guys that they can put in there. Not as good as Nolan Smith, but young guys with potential. Maybe somebody shows out with an opportunity with an experienced guy that in front of them that they weren't able to do before. So they're stacked with 4 and 5 stars on this Georgia roster. We'll see how that plays out. I think it's a very tough matchup for Georgia's defense for Tennessee. Now, if anyone can try to scheme something up, you'd have to say it'd be Kirby Smart and this Georgia staff. Smart was asked in the post game, how do you prepare for what Tennessee does offensively with everything they do, the tempo and balance and Hooker and all that? And he started laughing. It's like, good question. That's the age-old thing that defense coordinators are trying to figure out is how do you prepare and practice to get you ready for what you're going to see in speed and execution and precision on game day. And honestly, they can't. Similarities in personnel and in scheme with Alabama and Tennessee moved up and down the field and scored a bunch of points on Alabama. So
Talk about the O-line matchup versus that defensive line. Jalen Carter back for Georgia last week.
Yeah.
The Tennessee O-line has been very, very cohesive, both running the ball and in pass protection.
Yeah, and Tennessee's balance. They're running back 1-2 punch at Jabari Small. Jalen Wright has been terrific, and they can also run with Hendon Hooker also. Jalen Wright's coming off probably his best game in terms of physical runs, impressive runs, and they've been able to stay healthy. So that's been their 3 guys in the run game. The offensive line, that's another big reason why they've been successful. Tennessee's offensive line has been awesome, so much better than what we thought. Jason, they've had the SEC offensive lineman of the week 3 straight weeks.
Wow.
Right tackle Darnell Wright, a former 5-star, he moved from left tackle to right tackle this season. Man, he has been awesome. He went head to head and held down Will Anderson at Alabama a bunch.
Yeah.
When BJ Ojulari was on his side from LSU, Kentucky had a number of really good pass rushers they put there. He's been unreal. He's earned himself a lot of money. He's gotten into the higher draft conversation. And then Jerome Carvin last week was offensive lineman of the week, right? 2 weeks. And Jerome Carvin last week, he's a veteran. Javonte Spraggin has been offensive lineman of the week as a guard. They've had a couple of guys at left tackle, but both of them have done well. And then Cooper Mays is a rock in the middle where he's the key piece to getting them in that tempo. Jalen Hyatt's first touchdown, they ran the next play in 9 seconds. I mean, it is lightning fast, but that O-line has been good in pass pro and in the run game. Let me say this about the matchup with the offense and defense overall, Jason. It's not just the tempo and spreading you out. It's the fact that they have so many different playmakers,
right,
and so many different threats. You are in space conflict, you're in time conflict, and then you end up getting in the worst possible matchup. Tennessee gets Jalen Hyatt on stand-up linebackers and rush ends and safeties all the time. He's set Tennessee's single season touchdown record. And he's got already, he's up to 5th in the career touchdown record. And this is a school that's had a lot of great wide receivers get to the NFL. That's that kind of productivity, and they're constantly getting them in favorable matchups with those guys. And it's because of all the threats, it's because of subtle movements. And then so safeties are on them. And then their corners are passing Hyatt off to safeties over the top who are coming in on Tillman or McCoy. There's so many weapons. There's so much speed on the outside. They have big receivers. Now with Tillman back, he'll be 100% for the first time in this Georgia game. It even adds to the conflict. Other guys that have come in have done a great job. Tight ends can be a threat in the middle of the field. They're protecting Hooker, who knows everything, and he makes the right decisions and finds those matchups if it's not done by the coaching staff and the play call before that. They have it all humming right now.
All right, defensively, obviously this will be the place that everybody looks at Tennessee. If they have a weakness, it's defensively. You know, I know they've gotten better and better throughout the year. Obviously, you gave up a big number to Alabama, but you shut down Kentucky. You've played pretty consistently. They've been opportunistic with the turnovers. Is this where do you think Georgia really goes after their defensive line? Where do you think Georgia really tries to attack Tennessee defensively?
Well, Georgia is by committee in a lot of areas, including with their running backs and their receivers. Use a lot of different guys, and they're really good up front on the offensive line. So, yeah, Georgia's going to want to run the rock, but Tennessee's 9th in the country in rush defense. That's been their strength, and they've gotten better and better as the year has gone on. So they're putting up that wall. Now, teams have had more success in passing against Tennessee's pass defense, but I don't think the numbers really reflect. They're 127th in pass defense. They're better than that. One, teams are throwing a lot more. A lot of times they're throwing from behind on the scoreboard. And then also Tennessee's offense puts them on the field a lot quicker.
Right.
And the third thing is they've had a bunch of injuries. They also got Jalen McCullough back from sitting out after – they haven't called it a suspension, but basically – after his legal issue.
Right.
So he's back at safety. He makes all the calls in the secondary. The guy that filled in for him at safety, Danico Slaughter, moved to corner last game, and he was fantastic. Forced 1 interception, had another 3 interceptions. They lead the SEC in turnovers and interceptions. So that's a big jump from last year. Another thing they're better at is third down. They're 33% defense on third down. That is a huge improvement from last year. Those are 2 things, turnovers and third downs, that we talked about as keys for them being better this year, and they have been. It's the yards are there against them passing,
right?
But in other areas, they've been better in red zone also.
Right.
So you give up the yards, but you get a key stop here and there. That's the recipe, and I've trotted this out there a little bit. I was the recipe of the 2019 LSU team. Their defensive numbers weren't out of this world, but they had some dudes to get stops when they needed it.
Red zone
with
stops.
A prolific offense. Yep. With a prolific offense and an elite quarterback. Those offensive numbers are almost identical to Burrow and LSU 2019. Yeah, LSU's defensive numbers are a little bit better, but man, as the year went on, it was tougher for their defense. They still got it done and won games against great opponents. And this Tennessee team is on that similar track. Their turnovers will be big in this game for sure.
Georgia doesn't have elite wide receivers, but they do have an elite tight end group. That's, to me, that's the safety matchups with Washington and Brock Bowers is going to be huge because, Bennett, when it's a big moment, he's going to Brock Bowers or Washington more times than not.
Absolutely. And you're seeing them on the field together sometimes also, because they'll even split out Washington as a massive human
6'7",
being.
275.
Yeah. And he can run, obviously, as a 5-star. They have 3 5-star tight ends in their room.
Yeah.
It's just insane. A couple of them, Gilbert and that
don't even play. They don't even play.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really sick. An embarrassment of riches. Delp is the other guy. It's a former 5-star. But yeah, Bowers moves around. They'll use him on jet sweeps. They'll split him out. They'll use him in the backfield. Throw to him, screens down the field. He can do it all. So Tennessee's already said this week in our interviews with the coaches and players, they got to know where he's at all times. And it opens things up for other guys, even though it's by committee. McConkey and some of these other guys get opportunities because there's so much focus on Bowers. So, and usually Stetson Bennett has time also, which helps. So yeah, the tight end, that's Tennessee. If they have a weakness, to me, more than anything, it's pass coverage in the middle of the field,
right?
Especially with their linebackers who are better in pass coverage, but still will give up some plays. That's where Georgia can hurt Tennessee. Question is they get yards, all that. Can they get the stops in the red zone and get enough to where you put your offense back on the field and then get an extra score or two?
All right. Last thing I'll talk about, then we'll get a prediction. We'll get a kind of a overview here. Special teams, obviously these huge games, special teams blunders or making a play on special teams, field position stuff, critical. Give us a quick synopsis of the Tennessee kicker and the punter as far as good job making kicks, pressure kicks, and then obviously your punter and your return game being able to create a little field position.
Well, Tennessee's punter has a fresh leg. I'll tell you that. Paxton Brooks, not on the field all that much. He has 14 punts this year in 8 games.
Right.
And he had 3 last game. He had like 3 punts in the first 3 SEC games, something ridiculous. Tennessee has a punting advantage after Georgia's punter drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're not as good there. So I think Tennessee has a punting advantage. And then place kicking, probably pretty close, although Georgia's place kicker has only missed a couple of kicks.
Right.
Whereas Tennessee's Chase McGrath, he's had a good year, but he's missed a couple extra points now. One was blocked. Well, no, one he missed last week after a penalty pushed them back. And then he had one other miss earlier, which has been very rare. But and
the ugliest make in the history of the program. That was the ugliest kick I've ever seen as a former kicker that actually made it, and it wasn't blocked.
After he had missed a crucial kick earlier in the game,
right?
He came through in that area. But USC transfer, good from 52 in. So then Tennessee probably has the best coverage unit in the league.
Good.
They don't give up returns. They're excellent there. Punt return might even give Tennessee an advantage there. D. Williams, JUCO DB, he's been excellent, upgraded them to give them a threat there. Kickoff returns, no one's really doing any of that these days in football. But I would give Tennessee a slight edge on paper in special teams.
Again, you can't measure this guy. I know Baton Rouge was a good environment, but it was a 12 o'clock game. They're not going to have seen an environment like it is going to be in Athens, 3:30 Saturday. Do you think that the Tennessee guys are professional enough to handle that if things don't go great, if there's a false start here and there? Do you think that they're capable and experienced enough to be able to go into this environment and win the game?
I do, because they operate at such a fast pace that doesn't depend on making a ton of calls at the line of scrimmage. They know what they're doing and they go. And their coaches get them in the right place so often they don't have to make a lot of adjustments. They're not changing formations and moving guys from one side of the field to the other a ton. The way they go, I think that's a neutralizer to a visiting crowd that's really loud. So I think Tennessee is as equipped as anyone to handle that. Plus, just the poise that they've operated with so often. Their defense is actually used to it. That's another factor. Home crowd's going nuts. They still have to be able to communicate at home.
Right.
And so I don't think that's going to be an issue in this game either. Georgia's going to make plays, but that's another reason why Tennessee is better equipped at that. Here's another reason. Tennessee at times has slowed things down, especially on third down. They didn't last year, and they've been really good when they do slow it down and they can execute. And that's been in loud environments, did it LSU, Pitt. Georgia's on another level, but I think this Tennessee team, veteran, the way they do things, just not fazed by anything. So I don't think that'll be a big factor in this game.
Last question. What's the number that Tennessee's got to get to win? I mean, they're probably, do they need to get to 35 or do they think they got to get to 40?
35 is kind of the number I had in mind. I wonder if Kirby Smart is going to go for it on fourth down a little bit more,
right?
Try to keep some of those possessions down for Tennessee. Billy Napier had success with it. Brian Kelly did not. Mark Stoops didn't really have much of an opportunity to, because they were down big pretty early. So I wonder if Kirby, and he'll have confidence in his offense and Bennett too. So that will be a key part of this game. So maybe the possessions end up being down a little bit. So I will say 35, but Josh Heupel, he doesn't coach very many games where they're under 30.
Yeah,
they haven't been this year. So that's kind of usually the magic number. They win over 30, they lose. Heupel hasn't won a game where his teams, as a head coach, where his teams have scored under 30. And this team, I don't think, is doing that in this game. So I would say 35, but it'll probably get to over 40, the 42 to 38, somewhere in that range.
And here's the interesting thing about this game. It's a de facto playoff game because most people think whoever wins this game, if they can get to the SEC title game undefeated, win or lose in the title game, they're going to the playoff. Do you agree?
I do. And I don't think either one of these two teams, coming off of an emotional, important win, I don't think they'll have a letdown after that. Not with the schedule they have, not with the way, especially Tennessee's handled their business. They've handled their business actually a little bit better than Georgia in those lesser games. Georgia had those two close calls with Kent State and Missouri. Tennessee has walloped everybody.
Right.
So I don't think they'll have a letdown. So yeah, it almost is an entry into it. It's hard to say 100% who else is in the mix and all that. It definitely, I think, is the winner goes to Atlanta, if nothing else. And for Tennessee standpoint, that's what the players are talking about as their goal. Want to win the SEC championship. If you do, you're going to be in the playoff, and it takes care of itself. All
right, my man. What's the Saturday agenda? I know you're going to be in Knoxville. What's the viewing? Are you going to be at the house? Are you going to be out somewhere? What do you do? What are you going to be doing Saturday afternoon about 3:30? Yeah, a lot of social media stuff, as much pregame stuff as we can share on our social media accounts, which is Sports Animal 991, and on the website 991thesportsanimal.com. We'll probably do a little pregame and put that out there, and then at home with my Q Mini Golden Doodle Daphne and taking notes. Got to be quiet, man. I'm not going to be out with the fans and stuff. I got to put the content up and work on it, take notes, and just be ready to react to it and score updates and all that stuff. So I'll be at home, and man, it's just going to be wild that you got 1 versus 3 and Tennessee's involved in it, but enjoying the ride. No, I mean, again, in Tennessee being the 1, not the 3. That's the other amazing part. Well, Vince, again, if you're in the Tennessee area, anywhere in the Southeast, Vince does tremendous work. He does all the pre and post game stuff, video stuff, 99.1. He does Friday night football in Knoxville. So I'm sure if you're in that region, you've heard Vince do a great job on Friday night with your man, Jay Graham. Yeah. I know the high school season is getting close to being wrapping up there. Probably some playoffs getting ready to start, but yep. But just like down here, we're about ready to start the playoffs. But man, have a great weekend, man. Thanks for the awesome analysis, awesome breakdown, and good luck. You, man, appreciate it. Maybe we'll see you in some big games in around the holidays, and I'll get down to Tampa and we'll hang out. So thanks for having me. You got it, Vince. Appreciate it. Have a great week, and we'll be right back on the Powers on Sports podcast.